Cool. Okay, so before we will start our presentation, let's, as usual, go to our board and to see our progress. So I did review some of your code exercises. I mean, in general, they are looks good, and like, to be honest, there's like not much of the ways to implement this fizz and buzz using like regular loop and also using recursion. So it's kind of like have the same one concept that you guys will need to implement in your solution. Yeah, I see like there's like more in progress. I'll probably try to finish review them today after this session. Do you guys have any questions regarding the exercises? All right, so I will take it as a no, and I guess we can start. So today gonna be a very big topic. So today we're gonna talk about the locators. So I'm gonna explain you what the locators means a little bit later. So here's our agenda. So first of all, we're gonna talk about the locators overview. Little bit more about some HTML basics, what the element means, and like what the attribute is, and like what's the difference between them. So after that, we're gonna talk a little bit more about the best practices to finding locators. Then we're gonna go over CSS selectors. And after that, we're gonna talk about the XPath locators, little bit more about the difference between CSS and XPath and which one is better to use and in which cases. And after that, I'm going to show you how you can actually find locators on a web page and what the instruments you will need to use. And after that, we're going to do some small practice. We're going to all try to find specific locators for given elements on the page. All right, so let's get started then. All right, so first of all, when you work with web applications, you especially in automation, you will need to know some basics of HTML. Like, let's say you will need to understand what the text is and how the layout of the page, how it's all structured from the, what the header, what the body. I mean, kind of just a basic information, how it's especially how the texts are structured. Otherwise, otherwise it will be harder for you to find elements. But again, you don't need to know all of the HTML things, just some basic stuff, like basic elements and basic tags. And yeah, so where if you want to practice some HTML, you can go to the WG School, and there find a section about the HTML. And I'm going to share this presentation anyway, so all the links will be available. So feel free to go ahead and to go over some basics, if you feel you will need it. All right, so yeah, so going through the basic stuff, right? So this is an example of the one HTML element. So if you open any kind of a web application, right? So let me go over and open it here in the dev tool. Yeah, so basically here's the two ways to open the HTML tree, like let's say if you want to inspect some specific certain element, you can hover the mouse to that and click to the right button in your mouse and click to inspect. And it will actually highlight the element that you are inspecting, which is like pretty neat. Other way, you can actually go here, maybe not here. Yeah, you can click to the view page source. And if you will do that, it will open you the full HTML tree. I mean, it won't be like parsed. It will show you like as a one huge document as a string. And it's kind of like hard to, you know, like to find some elements. Like let's say you can try to find title here, but you will need to use a search to do that. Another search, title. Yeah, so for me, like personally, I prefer just, you know, like if I need to find some elements in HTML3, I'm just like hovering the mouse and clicking the inspect. And it showed me right away like what's the element I clicked, which is more convenient. And yeah, so this is, let's say, like, let's take this element as an example, right? So so it's like start as an element definition, like in this case, it's a div. And then it's like the element has specific attributes, right? Let's say this one has a class attribute and class name, it has a style, and that's it, I believe. Yeah, that's it. So this element has two attributes. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it may have like a 5 or 6, like let's say, in this example, it has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 attributes. So why you will need to attribute, right? Let's say, as you guys can see here, there's like a lot of div elements, right? And they're kind of like highlighted as in a kind of like purple or red color. So it's easier to identify them. But as you see, like all of them are like most of them are div elements, right? And the only way to differentiate this like a separate div elements, it's like to look for specific attributes inside these elements. So what the div element means, it's basically identifying the container of this specific element. And let's say A stands for a link in HTML. All right, so let's go back. So yeah, again, just try to differentiate the elements as a separate entity and the attributes. Attributes, they kind of include to these elements, and like all the attributes, in most cases, they have kind of value. And these values, they are wrapped with double quotes. So you kind of like know what this is like attribute value. So this is the first part. The second thing is like, because HTML is a tree, each element has a child element or a parent element. So basically, let me open again. Let's say, let's take this div element, right, for a specific container, which has this image for Sydney. And so this div element, it has a child element, which is a element like basically within this div element. So it's right now it's expanded, but you can hide it actually, and you will see this is kind of like a structure of that. Like this is div element is like opening case, and this one it's just a closing tag for this specific element. And so the A, it's a child element in this case, and the div, it's actually a parent element. And as you can see, this is a really huge tree of the elements, and basically like all these like elements of the div element is considered as a parent elements. Like let's say, let's go to the top level. The main element, it's also considered as a parent element for this like a child element. Yeah, so it may like seems or sound complicated, but it's important to understand because sometimes you have situations where you cannot identify, like it's hard to locate like this child element directly, let's say this A element. And sometimes the only way to do that just to look for this div element, like a parent element, and after you will identify the parent element, you can go like one step below and find this link element after that. Yeah, we will go over and interact with its elements like once we will go to the CSS and XPath locators after that. All right, so let me expand it. So what's the best practices considered for finding locators? So again, first of all, like if you're looking for specific locators, try to locate them by using using identifications, like they also referred as IDs. Yeah, thank you for highlighting. So after you'll find ID, try to use it. But if like element doesn't have an ID, you can also use a name. So the thing is like the difference between like ID and the name, like it's in a page, it's kind of like standard for each element to have unique identification. If there's like no identifications, I mean, if there's like several similar elements and they cannot have the same identification, right? If you see in a page elements which has the same ID, you can report it as a bug because it shouldn't be the case. For the names, it's like not that strict. You can have a few elements with the same names, but like it's kind of like normal. I mean, like developers, they also try to avoid it, but it's kind of a case when you will see a few elements with the same name. After that, like let's say if element doesn't have a identification ID or a name, try to find a attribute which is kind of like unique for the specific element. And okay, if you won't be able to use these methods, try to go to the CSS selectors or XPath locators. So we're gonna go over, like, we're gonna focus on these two mostly, like, but like, let's say we're gonna like go talk more about these two, but we primarily will focus on the CSS locators because it's kind of best practice in web automation use the CSS locators rather than XPath locators because they kind of more cross browser, like different browsers cannot have different CSS location for the same element, which is maybe the case for XPath because XPath, like when you're using XPath, you're basically interacting with HTML3 of the page. And some of the browsers, let's say like Internet Explorers, they can parse this HTML3 differently. And let's say if you're not using a best practices and you're using like absolute path instead of like a shorter way and cutting some of the parent elements, you may face a situation when like you won't be able to find the locator simply because the path for this locator is different. All right, so let's go to the CSS selectors. Uh, Again, CSS selectors, like I like them because they are simple, they are straightforward. It's easy to interact with them more than rather than XPath. The only limitation that comes to my mind in CSS, it's you cannot basically identify a text of this. Like you cannot find the element using its text. Basically, yeah, there's like just no way to do that, but you can do that in XPath. So this is kind of like a simple highlights of the CSS selectors. Let's say there's a few keywords that used in CSS. Let's say if you're looking for a specific element which has a class, you can specify the dot and the class name after that. So the dot, it's a keyword for CSS to find the class by its name. And it's the same for ID as well. Like if you're looking identification of these elements in the CSS, there's a special keyword, which is a pound sign. And pound sign and identification like name. And it's kind of like a shortcuts. You can also like use in another way, I believe. You can also like wrap it as a square brackets, say like, hey, ID equal to this value, but it's a kind of like bad practice. So in these cases, there's already created special keywords for ID in a class. All right, so in CSS, it's pretty simple. Like let's say if you're looking for a specific element, you can just like type it. Let me actually open the browser again. So if you want to practice with CSS and after you're expecting the element, you can press, if you're using a Mac, you can press Command and F. After you will do that, it will show you this search bar. So this is a search bar for this HTML3. It's like, don't be confused by the search bar in a page, because it won't look anything on a page, it will look it on HTML3. So using this bar, you can basically use it for searching CSS selectors, or you can use it to search XPath. All right, so let's try to practice using a CSS, right? So let's say I want to identify this class name, like class, sorry, not class, the div element. And using CSS, if I, like, let's say if I know it's a div element, I can just type div. And it will find me all the div elements on this page. And as you can see here, it's 289 div elements of the page. All right, but we're looking specifically for this one, right? So what we can do here, we can actually look for these attributes. Let's say we know this element, it has a class, right? And it has specific class name here. So let's try to find it using this class value. So after specifying the element div, you like to specify a class, and as you remember, I need to click that, and after that I will need to specify this specific value, and let me put it here. So in this case, it won't find anything because this class value, it has a space in a class name, and in the CSS you need to replace the space with a dot as well. After you'll do that, it will find an element, and as you guys can see here, it's also find like eight elements. So that's mean in this page we have 8 elements, like div elements with the same class. And I believe like it's all these images. Yeah, all of them have the same locator. Yeah, so sometimes it's kind of like a challenge to find like unique element, because once you will work with test scripts, you will specifically look for unique elements, because otherwise it may click to the different image. Let's say if you want to click to this, where was it? I mean, I don't know. Let's say like if you want to click for the second banner, right? And if it finds like 8 elements, like it can click to the some other one. Like let's say like in this like last image, or the first one. So in this case, yeah, try to play around, try to find more unique one. And yeah, so what else we missed here? So yeah, as I mentioned, to find like if you're looking for the element, just to type it there. And let's say if you want to specify sorry, if you want to specify the child element that comes after the parent element, you will need to include it as well. Let's say this div element, like their parent element is an A, right? Which is a link. And to do that, I will need to type space, and it will also find this element, because A is a parent element of this, like a div child element. And adding a space here, that means the A is a parent, and trying to find me this child element under the A. Or let's say if you want to specify this like parent element, the div that's beyond the A, you can also do that. And yeah. So I believe you can also use the full CSS selector, just clicking to the copy and clicking to the copy selector, and you can also paste it here. So you guys see, like in this case, it will write you the full path, like starting from the top, going down after this, like each element, and until it will reach this the first image element. So this way, it calls absolute path when you basically specifying the full path for this element in HTML3 without using like shortcuts, basically. So it's kind of like a bad practice. I would suggest you try to do that without using it. Let's say just delete it. And as you guys can see here, it's basically doing the same thing. Like you don't need to specify the full path here. All right, so let's go here, and yeah, basically like the full CSS selectors, they all it's kind of like a different, I mean, it's not like a different programming language, but it's kind of, you know, like the full big topic that you can like interact and practice. Like if you want to practice, you can also go to this W3 School. Let me actually open this link and show it to you. If you'll go here, you will see this table, and here it has like more wide explanation of how you can actually, like what kind of methods you can use to interact in CSS with the elements. yeah, you can like go over it, try to use it, try to practice. And the other things that I forgot to mention, it's if you're looking for specific, let's say for specific attribute, let's say if you're looking for this, if you want to find an element using this link, right? So what you can do, you can just skip everything, type, wrap it as with square brackets, wrap it with square brackets, and copy this, sorry, dun, dun, dun. Let's go back. Okay, let me copy it here. All right. So yeah, you can use this way. So in this case, you're specifying the attribute name, which is href equal to this link. I mean, href, it's a kind of like a key reserved attribute in HTML, which specifying a link. And yeah, so you can use this way for basically any elements. Like let's say you can find, I don't know if it's a good practice or not, trying to use this like a style attribute or like any other attributes here as well. Yeah, so I feel like it may seem confusing unless you will start to practice and unless you will start to work with that. So once you will have like some kind of practice to creating test scripts using a CSS, it will be like much more understandable and much more clear because I mean, like CSS itself, it's kind of like simplifying our life because like it's a really, you know, like dynamic and simple way to locate an element here. Yeah, so let's go back to presentation and let's talk about, actually, before we'll go to XPath, do you guys have any questions about the CSS selectors itself, or how you can like interact, with a page, like in a web page using a CSS? I didn't give you like any videos in this week about that, but I can like post you more, so you will have like a better understanding of that. Because I believe like for CSS and XPath, like it will kind of require, I don't know, like maybe more hours to understand and get an idea of that. But yeah, for now you can go to the W3 School and to see the basic functionality of CSS selectors. Yeah, do you guys have any questions so far? Anyone?
No, it's clear with CSS selectors.
Okay, nice. All right, so let's go to the XPath right now. So what's the XPath? XPath, so basically it's just another way to interact with elements of HTML3. Idea is the same, but it's kind of like more kind of symbols you will need to specify once you will like start to work with them. Let's say this is a simple, this is the same way. Like let's say if you want to find a class, right, in XPath, you will need to specify like double slashes, star sign, square brackets, and under the square brackets you will need to specify @, and after @ you will need to specify the attribute. Let's say in this case it's a class, And in XPath, there's like no keywords for any attribute, so you will need to explicitly identify this is a class equal to the class name, which will need to be wrapped in double quotes. Yeah, and the same for ID as well. The same for ID, the same logic. And if you were just looking for specific element, you will need to specify it after double slashes. And if you're looking for element inside the parent element, you will need to specify double slashes. If you're looking for the child element that's come right after the parent element, you will just specify the one single slash, and it will identify that this element comes right after this like parent element. Let me actually show you in here. I don't actually like this one. Let's actually try to find for a search. All right, let's inspect it. And here what we can see, this is an input element, and it has several attributes. It have a type, which is text. So autocomplete turns off. So what else? Placeholder, which is maybe like really important too, because I assume there would be like only one placeholder in the full page. I mean, it's not guaranteed, but we're gonna like check it right now if it's the case or not. All right, so let's try to find this element. Like in CSS, it will be simple. Like if you will want to find this input element, you will just type input, and yeah, so this search functionality, it basically looks for all the elements. It's not looking only specifically for CSS, and that's why we see 18 elements. But in terms of CSS, I believe it's only one input element. Oh, actually, no. Here's the one more. And all right, we have 4 elements. Actually, I don't know why these search elements used for. Maybe it's kind of element under this main element. Yeah, I don't know. But let's go back here. And again, like in CSS, if you want to specify this input element using this placeholder attribute, we will need to add square brackets and specify like placeholders and add this placeholder value. So interesting. It says here's the two elements using the same placeholder. Oh yeah, here's the 2 search bars. Interesting. They didn't actually have it. Usually, like previous version of this website, they had only one search bar, and so yeah, right now it will be like more tricky to find this unique search bar. Yeah, okay, let me actually show you how you can do that in CSS. Sorry, in XPath. So this was a CSS way. In XPath, what you will need to do, you will need to specify double slashes, specify the element name, which is an input. And after that, you will need to specify the attribute, right? And for attribute, you will need to add these squares. And in these squares, you will need to add the @ sign and specify the attribute name. which is a placeholder. Placeholder equals to the type city or a country. Yeah, so this is a way to do that in XPath. And as you guys can see here, it's also found 2 elements. And in this case, because XPath, it's kind of like more dynamic. So what you can also do using an XPath, you can, after you found this child element, and let's say you want to identify this parent element, right? So to do that, you see this child element highlighted, and if I want to move one step above, I will need to type slash double dots, and you see, like right now, I'm kind of like using this parent element, which is a div class location after suggest. And if I want to go again, like one step, like to the parent element for this specific locator, I will need to do the same thing. I will need to go here and here, and so after here, you can actually try to specify this specific class. Let's say, like, if it's a div element, div, and which has a class equals to this class name. Here we go. So yeah, and it turns out these both searches, they both having the same parent element. Yeah, these both. So in this case, we kind of need to I don't know, maybe look for this section one. Maybe this is the case. Let's try. Let's try. Right, and I believe it's wait, did I miss it? I think I saw it somewhere here. All right, so this is a way, I think, how can we separate these both search fields. So I see we have a div which has a container for this, like a header, right? And it's specifying this is a hero slider, which has specific class name. And we can actually find it here first. Specify it like div equal to the class, which is equal to this class value. All right, so now we found this class like a hero slider, and after that, like let's say here we're looking for this input element, and it wasn't able to find it. Interesting. I'm wondering why. So okay, let's try to use this one. here we go. So what's happened here is I specify this hero slider class, which is like not, which is like under the main one, and this like a search bar, it's kind of like a child of this like a parent element, not this one, and that's why it didn't find me in the first place. But here it found it finally. Yeah. Yeah. Again, like sometimes it's kind of trick to find unique elements for this. To find unique selectors for the elements. And I mean, as you guys can see here, it's kind of like a shorter way, but it's still like not perfect. This selector seems like really fragile to me. And in this case, I will probably ask, you know, like front-end developers, like, hey, like, can you guys, like, we have a two exact same search fields in a page, like, is there a way that you guys can like separate them, but by adding the, I don't know, like specific a class name or ID for this element, so it will be easier, you know, like for me to interact with these elements. Yeah, so sometimes it's better to ask for help from your developers than creating these like complicated selector path.
I thought I have a little question. Yeah. Is it a bad practice just to right click on the element and just copy XPath or CSS selector?
Yeah, let's try to do that. Let's do this copy XPath, right? And let's paste it here. And you see what it's doing. It's coming from the root folder, and it's coming to the div. It's coming to another div, another. So div is basically the container, right? And the problem here, like, it's still identifying it as a one element, but this selector, it will be very fragile. Let's say if they want to change, I don't know, like if they want to add any additional button here, right? Login, sign up, or like any other button, or skip registration. So in this case, it will mostly break your locator here, and you will need to specify you will need to update it. You know, to make your locators more flexible, you will need to kind of like, you know, like don't specify the full path and just to try to stick to only one shorter solution. So it will be like more flexible for you.
So it's better to specify manually, right? Without copying.
Yeah, let's say if I want to delete this element, and let's try it again. And you see like this locator is not working. It's not able to find. So you will need to like do it again. So this is a problem. This is a problem, and that's why I want to suggest you to use just to copy it blindly and post it.
So why do we need this function in this terminal?
Just to see like the full path, like just to compare. Maybe there's actually a few extensions for Chrome which like helps you to find like easier way to find locator. Like let's say like some of the extensions might be like pretty smart, and they can like find this like input element, and they can see like, hey, for this input element, I see it has a unique parent with this div with this specific class name, and it will like show you exactly the same locators that I showed you before that. But like it's I mean, you know, like you can, I don't use it. I don't use this feature because I know like it will show me the full path, and it's better to find like it will be better for me to find the shorter solution. Yeah, and for you guys, like I won't recommend you to install any extensions. Like try to like in this level, because you kind of like learning for now, like try to practice by yourself. Try to write every locators by yourself, So you will get like more practice, and after like some experience, it will be much easier for you. I mean, CSS selectors, they are like pretty easy to understand. It's not like a Java, you know, like you don't have to like learn the full programming language. Like once, like you will spend like a couple, maybe like an hour or maybe like 2 hours, and after that, I would say you will be like pretty expert in this field because it's not complicated at all. I mean, and the same for XPath. I mean, the XPath actually it's more complex because it's kind of allow you to do a lot of things. You can specify the function inside the XPath. Let's say you can. I mean, first of all, like using XPath, you can find elements using a text. Let's say here, if I want to find this like a text, I can use a contains function in XPath, and using this contains function, I can find this text if I will need it. But in real test frameworks in a companies, it's considered as a best practice to stick to the one way, like not to jump from CSS selector to the XPath selector. They kind of like using only one kind of approach for finding selectors, and in most cases, like I would say like 99%, like they will use the CSS selectors. Because locating elements by the text is also considered as a bad practice, because all this text, it's maybe changed, right? Like all this text, I'm pretty sure it's configured by CMS. And let's say like if they decide to do like any like A/B testing in this web page, they can say, hey, like this text, it's not attractive for our customers. Like let's change it. And if they will change the text, your locator will be broken, but the container that holds this text will be the same. Let me actually find it here. It says here's, I mean, in this case, it doesn't have unique one, but I'm pretty sure this like a hero slider class will be the same. All right, so let's go back to our presentation. So for XPath, you can also use a W3 School for practice. You can go here, open it. See the basic highlights of the elements, and see these functions that you can implement in the XPath. And yeah, just to go over, try to implement in your web application and to see how it all works here. Yeah, we will work a lot with this CSS in XPath, probably starting this Saturday, because like once we will have everything like set up and running, we will start to write like automation tests. And in this case, you guys will need to use these two approaches very, very, very often. And all right, so this is a simple practice for today. Like first of all, the full practice, it's focused on this Dean's web app, and this is actually will be our project for this course. Like all the further exercises we will do like here. We didn't do that for Java exercises because like there's like no, you don't really need the full project to do that. But starting today, we will mostly focusing here, and our further exercises will be also focused here as well. So I will post the link in a general channel. So guys, go ahead and open it first, because you will need it to use to solve these simple exercises. So let's try to solve them together. Like, first of all, let's find selector for the login button, right? So this is a login button, and as you remember, you need to right click here, click to the inspect, and it will highlight you the element. And you see this is a element, which stands for the link in HTML, and it has a href attribute, which is a login, and it also has a text login. So in this case, what do you guys think? Like, let's say using a CSS, what would be the approach to find this element? What do you guys think? I mean, the first step, maybe let's try to specify the element, right? Let's specify the A. Actually, let's use XPath for now. All right, so I'm specified the A element, and in this page, there's 93 elements, right? But we are looking specifically for this unique one. So this probably means we need to use a kind of like advanced thing to do that. So after specifying the A element, let's try to use this attribute here, because I assume like in this page, it will be like only one element having the same login URL. Specify the brackets, and here let's specify the attribute name, which is href equal to the /login.
We need add sign.
Yeah. Yep. That's. Thank you for correcting me. Yeah. This is the case. So now we identified this button, and it's only one element. All right, if I want to convert this XPath locator to the CSS, what I need to remove here, guys?
Double slashes first, square brackets, change to dot.
Sorry, can you repeat one more time?
Double slashes, remove double slashes.
Okay, remove double slashes.
Then,
and what else?
Square brackets, change to dot between A, and remove add sign.
All right, hold on. So I remove the square brackets. I'm removing the add and dot. A. You said that?
No, A, dot. I forget though.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very nice try, but in like when you're specifying the dot, it's a keyword only for classes. Like for, yeah, you see, like you cannot specify it for href like any other attributes. So because there's like no shortcuts, you will need to specify the square brackets as well.
Okay.
So now we kind of able to find it.
Okay.
Yeah, and also you don't need to identify its A element. You can also skip it, and if you will do that, it will still find this login button. And very important, guys, let's like make sure it's a unique one. It's like it's found only one of the whole elements here. This is really important, because you may have a, let's say you may have a different, like two login buttons, right? One in the top, and let's say one in the bottom. And let's say if you want to click specifically for this login button, so what may happen is like once you will like refresh the page, your button from the bottom, your button from the bottom, it can be load faster than the top one. And your script will identify, okay, like this, like login button is present, right? And it make like here and not this one. And let's say like another login button may like lead to the, let's say, old login screen, not the new one. And in this case, like your test most probably will fail because of that. So yeah, try to find the unique. This is a key role in a web automation. That's all the locators should be unique. All right, so let's try to get another one.
So, Azat,
So,
I have a question regarding XPath.
Okay.
So to locate an element on a page, right? So what would be the best option using XPath? I mean, so would you create like an XPath from scratch, or you can just copy the absolute XPath and then modify it into relative XPath? Because just correct me if I'm wrong, that absolute XPath should contain relative XPath, right?
Yeah, like relative XPath, relative path, it's kind of like basically the shorter way of the absolute XPath because it's just cutting everything that's
Right.
beyond.
So what would be like the fastest way just to create an XPath? Just create it from scratch, or to copy an absolute XPath, get rid of all the divs and like whatever it has in it, and just get like this relative XPath then you can use.
All right, so let's talk about it a little bit more. So like once you will want to find an element using XPath, right? So your step number one, you're going to this element, you're clicking to the right button, you click inspect, and you are looking what this element has, right? So this element is kind of like has href equal to login. So like you don't need to specify the absolute, right? You can like directly type the XPath from scratch, which is a equal to href. So like you don't like really like, you can like copy it from here, copy XPath, paste it here. And I mean, you see, it's not really worth it to specify the full path because like it's also will be like really fragile, and even though it didn't find the unique identification for this button, which is a link. And you see, like sometimes using the full XPath helpers, like it may be even like a worst one than you will create from scratch. In my general recommendation, I would say try to use like a shorter way when you're specifying the XPath. Don't use like absolute XPath, and always try to write it by yourself. Like try to do it everything from scratch, because it will be like even faster once you will get used to it, and also it will be like more stable than using like extensions or like Chrome extension to find it. I mean, there's maybe like certain cases, right? Let's say in this search button, search field, like we have these two, and we will need two test cases, right? We will need to test this search, and we also will need to test this like a button search, right? Because one of them may not work, but we will need to make sure like both of them work. And in this case, again, we will need to find the parent element here for this like a home slider, and after that to specify the search input element. And the same way here. Let's actually inspect it. I believe Yeah, I believe like this section book trip, it's should be unique. Let me make sure that I'm right. Section. All right, we have 15 sections, which has a class equal to this. Yeah, so this section with this class, it's a unique one. And so again, like to find this search bar, you will need to first find this parent element, and only after that specify the input, which is the element for the search field. Yeah, in these cases, like you will need to play around and find some tricks how you can do that. Yeah. Did I answer your question? Oh. Or are you like still kind of confused? I mean, in shorter way, I would say, yes, always write locator from scratch. It will be always better than you will use the full path for this element. This will be more stable, more short, more readable, and I don't see like any advantages to using the full XPath for it.
So the XPath we have on the screen right now, that's the relative XPath, right?
Yes, yes. Because you see, once you will specify the double slashes, that's mean like it's already like relative XPath. Because you kind of like specifying the double slashes, that's mean you kind of like cutting all the parent ones. You're like shortcutting to here. Because let's me copy it again. And paste it here. I mean, you see the funny thing is here, this is still like relative XPath because it's not starting from the top, right? Let me open the page source. So you see like here, the first element will be like HTML, I believe, like the first parent. And after HTML, you will need to go down, down, down. Actually scroll it here. Yeah, so the first one would be like HTML, and then you will need to specify the body. HTML, then body, and go like down, 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 down until you will reach this element. So you want like, when you will use a absolute XPath, you're not specifying the double slashes. You will specify only single slashes, meaning like you're referencing to the next child element. Yeah, and finally we have this div, which has an ID root. Yeah. Does it make sense, guys? Do you have like any other questions about the relative and absolute XPath? Yeah, so again, like I would suggest you do not write the full XPath to any elements. Try to use shorter ways to access any elements.
I think the best way to get the point, just practice.
Yeah, that's good advice. We will do a lot of practice with that later on, but if you want to like prepare yourself a little bit more, you can just go to W3 School and see what you can do, and maybe like go to this Dean's master.now.sh and trying to find any like locators here. All right, guys, so we kind of like running out of time already. again, like if it doesn't make sense for you, like don't worry, because we will cover it again on Saturday. Once we will like do like a real practice with like real automation, and it will make more sense for you once you will start to write actual tests. Yeah, just like a practice, and it will be like easier and easier. And again, like as I said, like CSS and XPath, it's kind of they may seem complicated because you kind of have to work with all the HTML tree and all these elements. But once you will get used to it, this will be like easy, like much easier.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, all right. If you guys don't have any questions, I'll probably we'll see you all. We'll see you all on Saturday, and yeah, try to finish all your homework by the time.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Azad.
Goodbye.